At my retirement gala, my wife announced she was leaving for a rival exec. My twin sons cheered. I calmly set my glass aside and said, "Celebrate, boys, but understand this. I'm not your biological father. I adopted you out of charity, and tonight my charity ends." I stood inside St. Regis Ballroom at 8:30 p.m. The air smelled of expensive lilies and roasted tenderloin. 300 people were staring at. Sophia stood on the stage, the microphone gripped so tightly in her manicured hand that her knuckles were white. She wore a midnight blue gown I had bought her in Milan 6 weeks ago. "I am filing for divorce then," she declared. The sprawling room went dead silent. The clinking of silverware stopped. A waiter froze mid-pour near table 4. "I have finally found a man whose ambition matches mine. He is 42. He is everything your tired soul is not." The floor seemingly dropped out from under me. I turned toward my son, expecting to see devastation. I expected the boys I raised to rush to the stage, to intervene, to ask their mother what on earth he was doing. Instead, Ryan let out an arrogant bark of laughter. He leaned against the ice sculpture, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke Zegna suit, a suit I paid for. Tyler started enthusiastically clapping. "About time," Tyler shouted. His voice echoed off the gilded ceiling. "Mom deserves a winner. You are just an exhausted ATM. We have been waiting for her to drop your dead weight for 6 months." They snickered together, clinking their scotch glass. My colleague from the architecture firm exchanged horrified glances. I looked at the three of them, my family. I mentally tallied the sprawling luxury estate I financed, the exorbitant Ivy League tuitions I covered, the seed money for Ryan's failed tech startup, the strings I pulled to get Tyler his internship. They wanted a public meltdown. They wanted the satisfaction of watching the stoic, dependable Ethan crack in front of his peers. I slowly set my champagne flute onto the crisp white tablecloth. I felt a strange cold clarity wash over me. The 30 years of grinding through 90-hour week, the missed sleep, the constant pressure to provide, it all detached from me in a single exhale. I took a deep breath, adjusted my tie, stepped up to the podium. I did not scream. I just smiled. It was a hollow, exhausted smile that instantly caused Sophia's triumphant sneer to falter. She took a half step back as I reached for the microphone. "Celebrate, boys," I said, my voice echoing eerily calm through the PA system. "If ruthless power is what you worship, go follow her. But before you clear out my office, there is a reality I kept buried for 24 years, a secret I concealed to protect your ego." Ryan rolled his eyes, taking a sip of his drink. "What? You are going to write us out of the will? We do not care. Caden is bringing Mom in as a partner at his development firm. We don't need your dusty trust fund." "No," I whispered, leaning closer to the mic. "It is about your genetic. You see, Sophia, you constantly brag they inherited my analytical mind. You love telling your country club friends how they had my drive, but we both know the truth." Sophia's face turned ash white, the smugness drained from her eye. "I am not your biological father," I said. I locked eyes with Ryan and Tyler. Their smirk vanished. "Your mother was drowning in $60,000 of credit card debt when I met her. She was 24 and pregnant by a married city councilman named Thad Beckett, who paid her $50,000 from a slush fund to vanish. I adopted you out of charity. I refused to let you grow up as the collateral damage of a cheap political scandal." The ballroom was so quiet I could hear the chandelier bulb hum. The boys' arrogant postures completely dissolved. Ryan put his glass down. Tyler stared at his mouth slightly open. "I spent 24 years playing the role," I continued, my tone sharpening into a blade. "I ground myself to dust so my charity cases could have elite networking trips, summer homes, and debt-free lives. I loved you out of obligation, and eventually, I thought I loved for real. But tonight, looking at how much you genuinely savor my humiliation, my charity has officially evaporated." "You are making this up," Tyler stammered. His voice cracked. "Mom, tell him to shut up." Sophia said nothing. She was staring at pure horror. I reached into my breast pocket and retrieved a sleek silver flash drive. I had meticulously prepared it 3 weeks ago, right after I discovered the hidden offshore account application that Sophia's forensic accountant accidentally sent to my home printer instead of hers. I tossed the drive onto the stage. It hit the hardwood with a sharp clatter. "It contains the original hush money transfers from Thad Beckett," I said cold, "and a discreet genetic panel I commissioned last month just to have the paperwork bulletproof. Verify the timestamp." I turned to Sophia. She was trembling. "And Sophia, since you are running off with Caden Farrow, you should know I did not simply retire today. I finalized the sale of my 60% stake in the architecture firm this morning to a European conglomerate. The $70 million is sitting in an irrevocable offshore trust under my name. Because you demanded that post-nuptial agreement 2018 to protect your vanity boutique from my business liability, you are legally entitled to absolutely nothing." Sophia gasped violently, her hand flying to her chest. "Ethan, you cannot do this. The penthouse, the joint account. The penthouse is a corporate asset," I stated firm, "part of the sale. Since the boys possess zero of my blood, and you filed for divorce on a stage in front of my board of directors, my financial umbrella closed 10 minutes ago. I have revoked your access to the family trust. I have terminated your executive roles at my firm, effective at midnight. The luxury cars you drove here are leased under my name, and the valet is handing the keys to my retrieval team as we speak." Ryan began to hyperventilate. He stepped away from the ice sculpture, holding his hands up. "Dad, wait! We were just joking around. We didn't know she was going to do this in public, I swear." "Do not ever call me Dad again," I said, stepping down from the stage and walking briskly toward the grand exit. "That title was an earned privilege that you just permanently revoked. You wanted a life without my dead weight. Go track down the disgraced politician who shares your DNA. Maybe he will fund your lifestyle." I pushed through the heavy brass doors of the St. Regis and walked out into the cool night air. The valet manager, a guy named Lackland who I always tip generously, caught my eye and nodded. He had already supervised the loading of Sophia's Range Rover and the boys' matching Porsche onto 3 flatbed tow trucks. I got into the back of my waiting town car. "Drive," I told the chauffeur. My phone started ringing before we even reached the end of the block. It was Sophia. I let it go to voicemail, then Ryan, then Tyler, then Sophia again. I turned the device off and watched the city lights blur past the tinted window. I spent the night at a midtown hotel. The silence in the room was absolute. I poured myself a black coffee the next morning, sitting by the window overlooking the skyline, and turned my phone back on. 74 missed calls, a string of frantic texts from Sophia ranging from furious threat to pathetic apology. At 9 a.m., there was a knock on my hotel door. I opened it to find Jasper Locke, my corporate attorney, and one of the few people I actually trust. He looked exhausted, carrying a thick leather briefcase. "You blew up the bridge while you were still standing on it," Jasper said, walking past me and setting his briefcase on the glass coffee table. "I got a call from Caden Farrow's legal team at 6 this morning. I sat down opposite opposite him. And Sophia's claiming financial abuse and coercion, Jasper said, pulling out a stack of docs. She filed an emergency injunction, freeze the transfer of the $70 million. She's arguing that the postnuptial agreement is invalid because you allegedly hid the impending sale of the firm when she signed. She signed that postnup 8 years ago, said flatly. I hadn't even met the European buyers until last October. I know that, you know that, but she's retained a very aggressive litigator, a woman named Vida Slade. Vida specializes in unspooling high net worth trusts. Jasper rubbed his temples. Sophia is also claiming you illegally obtained the genetic material for the DNA test you mentioned last night. She's threatening a civil suit for breach of privacy. Let her sue, I said, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. The DNA was collected from hair trimming off their bathroom floor. Perfectly legal to test abandoned material. It's not just Sophia, Jasper said, hesitating. He looked at me with a grim expression. Thad Beckett called my office an hour ago. I paused, the mug halfway to my mouth. I hadn't spoken to the man in over 2 decades. How did he find out? Jasper pulled his laptop out, opened it, and turned the screen toward me. It was a video on a social media platform. The angle was from table 4, the waiter who had frozen mid-pour. The entire speech, crystal clear audio. It already had 2 million views. He is livid, Jasper said quietly. Beckett is gearing up for a gubernatorial run next year. This video just exposed his 24-year-old affair and the slush fund payoff to the entire state. His PR team is in full meltdown mode. He told me he intends to bury you in defamation lawsuit. He should issue a public retraction claiming you lied out of spite. I have the bank record, Jasper. The $50,000. It came from a shell corporation tied to his former campaign manager. Doesn't matter if it's true, Ethan. He has limitless political backing. He can keep us in discovery for years. He'll drain your resources just to punish you for putting his name back in spotlight. Before I could answer, a loud, frantic pounding hit my hotel room door. Jasper and I exchanged a look. I stood up, walked to the peephole, and looked out. It was Ryan. His hair was disheveled, and he was still wearing the trousers from his Zegna suit. Though the jacket and tie were gone, he looked frantic. He pounded the heavy wood again. Ethan, open the door. I know you're in there. I unlocked the deadbolt, pulled the door open. Ryan practically fell into the room. He smelled like stale alcohol and sweat. This was the boy who, 12 hours ago, had laughed at the destruction of my marriage. Now he looked like a terrified child. They locked us out, Ryan gasped, his eyes darting between me and Jasper. The keycards to the penthouse didn't work. The building security escorted Mom and us out. Caden wouldn't answer his phone when Mom called him to ask for a place to stay. I watched him. I felt no pity. Caden Farrow liked wealthy, powerful women. Sophia is currently unemployed, homeless, and cut off from my capital. Why would he answer? Ryan grabbed my arm. You have to fix this. My credit cards are declining. Tyler tried to book us a room at the Four Seasons and it bounced. I have a margin call on my brokerage account today for $80,000. If I don't cover it, I'm ruined. I stepped back, firmly detaching his hand from my sleeve. You are an adult, Ryan. Call Thad Beckett. Maybe he'll cover your margin call. Thad Beckett doesn't know us, Ryan yelled, voice cracking. He sent Mom a cease and desist letter at 4 a.m. He said if we ever try to contact him, he'll have us arrested for harassment. Jasper quietly closed his laptop. The room felt incredibly small. Then I suggest you find a job, I said, because the ATM is closed. Ryan stared at me, his chest heaving. The desperation in his eyes suddenly shifted, hardening into something cold and familiar. It was the exact same look Sophia gave me when she was backed into a corner. Fine, Ryan breathed, his voice dropping to a low, venomous register. You want to play it like this? I didn't want to do this, but Mom told me what you keep in the storage unit in New Jersey. The old blueprint. The ones from the Ridley Plaza project 2014. I froze. Jasper looked up sharply. Mom kept a copy of the structural variance report, Ryan said, a nasty smirk creeping onto his pale face. The ones you signed off on before the city changed the building code. If Vida Slade leaked those to the city inspector, they'll red tag the entire building. The European buyers will void the $70 million sale before Friday. He took a step closer to me. Wire me the 80 grand by noon, then, or I blow up the sale. I looked at the boy I had raised for 24 years. He was sweating right through his expensive shirt, his chest heaving, his eyes wide and panicked. For a brief second, I searched myself for any lingering trace of paternal instinct, any urge to write the check, to save him from his own reckless stupidity just one last time. There was nothing, just a hollow, echoing silence where my love for him used to be. Jasper calmly reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and a silver pen. He didn't look angry. He looked entirely bored. Just so I am completely clear, Ryan, Jasper said, his voice smooth and conversational. You are standing in a hotel room in front of a licensed attorney, demanding an $80,000 wire transfer. In exchange, you are offering to withhold documents that you believe will sabotage a $70 million corporate acquisition. Is that correct? Ryan shifted his weight, glancing nervously at Jasper. I'm talking to my dad. Stay out of it. I'm not your dad, I said. And Jasper is the corporate counsel for the entity you are currently threatening, so he is very much in it. It's not extortion, Ryan stammered, though his voice lacked the venom it had 10 seconds ago. It's a settlement for emotional distress. It is textbook extortion, Jasper corrected gently, writing something down on his pad. Under New York state law, extortion is a Class E felon. Furthermore, interfering with a finalized corporate merger using stolen proprietary documents opens you up to civil liability that will make $80,000 look like a rounding error. The buyers have a legal team of 40 people who will happily sue you into indentured servitude. Ryan's jaw tight. He looked back at trying to find a weak spot. Vida Slade says those blueprints are a smoking gun. I let out a short, dry laugh. I couldn't help it. Vida Slade is a divorce attorney, Ryan, not a structural engineer. I walked over to the coffee pot and poured myself a second cup. The Ridley Plaza variant was a localized zoning dispute. We submitted 6 different drafts to the city planning board in 2014. The ones your mother took from my home office and put in that storage unit were the draft the city rejected. They were stamped void on the back page. We built the tower according to the amended code, which the city inspector signed off on in 2016. I took a sip of the black coffee. It was lukewarm now, but it tasted fine. Your mother has been paying $200 a month for 8 years to guard a box of useless trash because she never bothered to read the final page. Ryan stared at me. The color drained completely from his face, leaving him looking sickly pale. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The last remaining card he thought he held had just turned to dust in his hand. The margin call is due at noon, I reminded him quietly. You have less than 3 hours. I suggest you leave my room. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He just turned around, his shoulders slumped, and walked out the door. The heavy wood clicked shut behind, sealing the silence back into the room. Jasper sighed and tossed his pen onto the glass table. Well, that was unpleasant. He's desperate, I said, setting my mug down. Sophia must have realized the trust was locked. Panic. They thought they had me cornered. They don't have you cornered, but the water is getting muddy, Jasper said. He opened his laptop again. We need to deal with Thad Beck. His PR firm just released a statement. Jasper turned the screen toward. It was a press release from Beckett's Exploratory Gubernatorial Committee. The headline was crisp and aggressive. Councilman Beckett condemns malicious defamation by disgruntled architect. I skimmed the text. Beckett was claiming the video was a fabricated deepfake, or alternatively, the ravings of a man having a mental breakdown during a bitter divorce. He completely denied the affair with Sophia, denied the $50,000 payment, and announced he was filing a defamation suit against me by the end of the biz day. He's doubling down, I said. He knows I have the bank record. He doesn't care, Jasper replied, rubbing his eyes. In politics, the truth doesn't matter as much as the noise. He's trying to make you look like a crazy, vindictive ex-husband. If he casts enough doubt, his donors won't pull out. He just needs to survive the news cycle. And to do that, he's going to drag you through the mud. Before I could process that, Jasper's cell phone vibrated on the glass table. He glanced at the caller ID and his expression dark. Who is it? I asked. Imogen Trask, Jasper said grim. The lead acquisition executive for the European buyer. She flew into JFK last night to finalize the asset transfer. Answer it. Put her on speaker. Jasper swiped the screen and set the phone down. Good morning, Imogen. You have Ethan and Jasper here. Good morning. A sharp-lipped British voice crackled through the speaker. There was no pleasantry in her tone. I will be blunt, gentlemen. My board woke up to a viral video of the man whose firm we just purchased for $70 million airing his incredibly messy domestic disputes on stage, explicitly stating he sold the company to hide assets from his wife, Imogen. The sale was perfectly legal and vetted for 6 months. Jasper started. I don't care about the legality, Jasper. I care about the optic, Imogen cut in. We are a publicly traded entity in Frankfurt. We just bought a prestigious American architecture firm to anchor our U.S. expansion, and its founder is currently the main character of a political sex scandal on American social media. Our legal team is reviewing the morality clause in the final acquisition contract. My stomach tight. I leaned over the table, speaking directly into the phone. Imogen, this is Ethan. The firm's assets are pristine. The contracts are signed. My personal life has no bearing on the operational capacity of the business. It does when you drag the business into it, Imogen said coldly. You explicitly named the sale in your speech. You tied the company's transition to a revenge plot against your wife. The board is extremely unhappy. They are sending our corporate compliance team to your office this afternoon to review every single project file and financial ledger from the last 10 years. That's a violation of the transition agreement, Jasper warned. You own the firm, but Ethan is retained as a consulting senior partner for 9 days. You can't authorize a hostile audit without formal cause. We just did, Imogen replied. And Ethan, we expect you to be there at 2 o'clock to answer their question. If we find even one discrepancy, one misplaced dollar that validates your wife's impending lawsuit against us, we will freeze the $70 million in escrow and tie you up in international arbitration for the next decade. Do not be late. Jasper and I sat in silence. The hum of the city traffic drifted up through the thick glass of the window. My grand clean exit was rapidly turning into a seat. I had thought walking away from Sophia and the boys would be the end of it. I hadn't realized I was just trading one war for another. Well, Jasper said softly, packing his legal pad back into his briefcase. We better get you a fresh suit. We bought the suit at an overpriced boutique 3 blocks from the hotel. I didn't care about the cut or the designer, only that it was charcoal gray and fit well enough to act as armor. Jasper paid for it on his corporate card. Since my personal accounts were currently caught in the crossfire of Sophia's emergency injunction, the tailor hemmed the trousers in 20 minutes while I sat in a leather chair, staring at the muted news on a flat-screen TV. My face wasn't on the broadcast, but my phone hadn't stopped vibrating in my pocket. I had silenced it, but the constant, rhythmic buzzing against my thigh was a physical reminder that the blast radius of last night was still expanding. By 1:45 p.m. we were stepping out of an Uber in front of the glass and steel high-rise that housed my former firm. I had designed the lobby myself in 2008. The Italian marble, the brutalist concrete pillar, the sheer verticality of the atrium. I usually walked through these doors with a sense of quiet ownership. Today, I felt like a trespass. The security guard at the front desk, a guy named Marcus who I'd exchanged nods with for 6 years, looked down at his monitor as I passed. He didn't say hello. Shoulders back, Jasper murmured as we stepped into the elevator. They're going to try to rattle. Imogen Trask didn't fly across the Atlantic to have a friendly chat. She came to find a breach of contract. The elevator doors parted on the 42nd floor. The reception area was unnervingly quiet. No phones were ringing. The usual hum of plotters printing large-scale schematic was absent. As I walked down the central corridor toward the executive boardroom, I saw my colleagues, draftsman, junior architect, project manager. They were standing in small clusters near the break room or sitting frozen at their desk. Every single pair of eyes tracked. My assistant, Sable, was standing outside the boardroom door. She had been with me for 9 years. She was fiercely protective, ruthlessly organized, and currently looked like she had slept. Ethan, Sable said, her voice tight. She glanced nervously at the frosted glass doors of the board. They've been in there since noon. They brought their own server. They've locked out the local network ad. Where is Bowen? I asked. Bowen was the firm's chief financial officer. He had brokered the tax structures for the European buyout. Inside, Sable said, swallowing hard. He looks terrified. Ethan, the video. I know, Sable. I'm sorry you had to be dragged into this. She shook her head slightly, her eyes dropping to the floor. Sophia called the office an hour ago. She tried to order me to pack up the files in her corner office and messenger them to a residential address. I told her clearance was revoked. She screamed at me for 3 minutes and threatened to sue me personally before I hung up. You did the right thing, Jasper said, stepping forward. Don't take any more calls from her. If she shows up, call building security. I pushed open the boardroom door. The temperature in the room felt 10 degrees colder than the hallway. The massive mahogany table, which normally seated 20, was entirely covered in laptop, expanding file folders, and legal pads. 6 people in dark suits were typing furious. At the head of the table sat Imogen Trask. She was in her late 40s, with severely cut dark hair and a posture that suggested she was used to being the most dangerous person in any room. Bowen sat halfway down the table, sweating through his pale blue shirt. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and pure panic. Ethan, Imogen said. She didn't stand. She didn't offer her hand. Sit down. Locke, you may sit as well, provided you don't interfere with our forensic process. Jasper pulled out a chair for me and sat beside. I buttoned my new jacket and rested my hands on the table. You have access to everything. everything, Imogen. As I told you on the phone, the firm's assets are exactly as represented. Are they? Imogen asked. She tapped a manicured fingernail against the trackpad of her laptop. Because when a high-profile individual publicly detonates his marriage and casually mentions hiding a $70 million asset from his spouse, regulatory bodies tend to get very into it. The Frankfurt board is terrified you've entangled our clean acquisition with marital fraud. The trust is legal, Jasper stated. It was established prior to the finalization of the sale and heavily documented. His wife signed a post-nuptial agreement relinquishing claim to his business asset. Yes, the infamous post-nup, Imogen said dryly. She gestured to one of the auditors, a thin man wearing wire-rimmed glasses. He slid a manila folder across the mahogany table. It stopped directly in front of open. I opened the fold. Inside was a printed spreadsheet detailing the firm's primary operating account over the last 30 days. Several lines were highlighted in bright yellow. As part of the final closing conditions, your firm was required to maintain a specific cash reserve, Imogen said, her voice devoid of any inflection. A freeze on all non-essential executive compensation and discretionary spending went into effect 3 weeks ago. You signed that addendum. I did, I said, scanning the document. And we haven't made any discretionary payout. Only standard vendor invoices and payroll. Look at the highlighted line. Bowen suddenly croaked from down the table. He took a nervous sip from a plastic water bottle. Ethan, I didn't catch it until they ran the macro this morning. I focused on the yellow line. 3 days ago, a wire transfer of $450,000 had cleared the operating account. The payee was listed as Aura Design Consult. My blood ran cold. Aura was the corporate shell name for Sophia's vanity boutique, the high-end interior design firm she ran that had never turned a profit in its 6 years of existence. I had bankrolled its launch, but it had never been a vendor for my architecture firm. I didn't authorize it, I said immediately. The bank says otherwise, Imogen countered smoothly. She clicked her mouth, and the auditor slid a second piece of paper across the table. It was a printed copy of a digital authorization form. At the bottom was my digital signature. The IP address logged for the approval matched my home office in the penthouse. The timestamp was Tuesday night at 11:15 p.m. I stared at the timestamp. Tuesday night. I had been at a charity dinner for the local historical society. I hadn't gotten home until past midnight. Sophia had stayed home, claiming she had a migraine. Sophia initiated this, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. She had access to my home network. She knew the passcode to my tab. I don't care if your golden retriever initiated it, Imogen snapped, dropping the cold professional facade for a fraction of a second. The money left the firm's operating account and went into a shell company controlled by your wife, directly violating the freeze order, and it was authorized by your credentials. It's embezzlement, Jasper said immediately, leaning forward. If Sophia fraudulently used Ethan's credentials to drain corporate funds, that's a criminal matter. We will file a police report immediately. It's only embezzlement if you can prove you did do it together, Imogen said, leaning back in her chair. From where I'm sitting, it looks like a man preparing for a messy divorce decided to siphon nearly $500,000 of our company's cash to his wife to soften the blow of cutting her out of the $70 million. Or perhaps she found out about the sale, and this was your hush money. Either way, you breached the contract, Ethan. Imogen, look at the timeline, I argued, keeping my voice level. She filed for divorce last night on a public stage. I humiliated her and the boys in front of 300 people. Does that look like a coordinated effort to share assets? It looks chaotic, Imogen correct, and corporate board hate chaos. As of this moment, the $70 million in escrow is frozen. The transfer to your offshore trust is halted. Jasper stiffened beside. On what ground? You can't unilaterally freeze an escrow account without a court order. We filed for an injunction in Delaware federal court an hour ago, Imogen replied calmly. We are claiming fraud in the induced. The money doesn't move until this $450,000 is returned, and until we are satisfied there are no other financial landmines buried in this company. She closed her laptop with a sharp snap. You have 48 hours. Return the funds. Prove your wife stole them without your knowledge. If you can't, we terminate the acquisition, demand our initial deposit back, and sue you for damages that will bankrupt whatever is left of your life. I walked out of the boardroom feeling like the floor was tilting. Jasper was right on my heel, already dialing phone. Sable looked up from her desk as we passed. She held up a stack of Hink message slip. Ethan, Thad Beckett's lawyers called twice, and she hesitated. A woman named Vita Slade is waiting for you in the lobby. She said she represents Sophia, and she has an offer. I stopped walking. The name hung in the air. Jasper lowered his phone, ending the call before it connected. Vita Slade, Jasper, a muscle twitching in his jaw. She doesn't do house calls unless she's smelling blood in the water. She knows about the transfer. Sophia took the money, realized she was cut out of the trust, and now she's sending her attack dog to leverage the stolen cash. I said, piecing it together. The absolute audacity of. After 24 years of my funding her life, her first instinct upon realizing I was done was to rob and then use my own money to bargain with me. We don't meet with her, Jasper said firm. We go out the back freight elevator. We file a police report against Sophia for wire fraud, and we let the detective deal with Vita. I looked down the long corridor toward the glass doors of the main lobby. I could just make out the silhouette of a woman sitting on the leather sofa, reading a magazine. No, I said, straightening my jacket. If we run, Imogen thinks we're guilty. If we call the police, Sophia destroys the hard drive and the money disappears into a crypto wallet before the ink on the warrant is dry. Ethan, you cannot negotiate with Vita Slade without a litigation strategy, Jasper warned, stepping in front of. She will twist every word you say. I'm not going to negotiate, I said, stepping around him. I'm going to find out exactly what Sophia thinks she's buying with my money. I walked through the glass doors into the lobby. The woman on the sofa looked up. Vita Slade was in her 50s, wearing a sharp, tailored white suit that stood out darkly against the dark marble of the lobby. She had silver hair pulled back into a severe bun and eyes that assessed me like a butcher assessing a side of beef. She stood up slowly, dropping the magazine onto the glass coffee table. Ethan, she said. Her voice was smooth, cultured, and entirely devoid of warmth. I'm glad you decided not to use the freight elevator. Slade, I said, stopping a few feet from her. Jasper stood shoulder to shoulder with me. You have exactly 2 minutes before my counsel here calls the precinct to report your client for felony wire fraud. Vita didn't flinch. She actually smiled, a thin razor-like expression. Wire fraud is such an ugly term. We prefer to call it an anticipatory division of marital assets, especially since the digital signature used was yours from your home network on a device you left unsecured. It's theft, Jasper snapped, and it violates a federal freeze order on the company account, which is why you're in so much trouble with the European in there, Vita said, nodding toward the glass doors. Sophia knows about about the audit and she knows Imogen Trask is threatening to blow up your $70 million payday over a measly $450,000. I stared at her. What does she want? Vida reached into her designer briefcase, pulled out a single sheet of paper. Sophia is entirely reasonable. She recognizes that the marriage is over. She also recognizes that her actions last night complicated things. She is willing to return the $450,000 to the firm's operating account by 5 o'clock today, thereby satisfying your buyers and unfreezing your escrow. And in exchange? I asked, knowing the knife was coming. In exchange, Vida said, handing the paper to Jasper. You sign this. It's an addendum to the 2018 post-nuptial agreement. You agree to retroactively void the clause protecting your business asset. You give Sophia a flat 20% of the $70 million sale, $14 million tax-free. Furthermore, you will issue a public statement apologizing to Thad Beckett, claiming the DNA results were fabricated in a fit of jealous rage, thereby clearing him and the boys of the scandal. I let out a slow breath. $14 million in my public humiliation just to get back the company money she stole. If you refuse, Vida continued softly, Sophia keeps the $400,000. She transfers it to an offshore account in the Caymans within the hour. Imogen Trask voids your sale. You lose the $70 million. You lose the firm, and you spend the next 5 years fighting Thad Beckett's defamation suit with zero liquid capital. Jasper looked at the paper, his face pale. He looked at me. Vida checked the gold watch on her wrist. It's 2:15, Ethan. Sophia is sitting at her laptop right now, logged into the routing portal. She's waiting for my text. Does she send the money back to the firm, or does she send it to the Cayman? Tell her to send it, I said. Vida's smile froze. The lobby was suddenly very quiet. The distant hum of the elevators felt amplified. A low mechanical drone against the sudden silence. Excuse me, Vida asked, her voice losing a fraction of its smooth polish. You heard me. Tell her to wire it to the Cayman. I took a step closer to her. But before you hit send, I want you to think about what you are actually doing, Miss Lade. Because my wife isn't a criminal mastermind. She's a panicked woman who thinks she's untouchable. Jasper stepped up right beside me, catching the rhythm. The transfer was flagged by a European corporate auditing team at 1 o'clock, Jasper said, his voice dropping into a deadly professional register, which means it is already part of an active corporate fraud investigation. If your client moves those funds across international borders now, she commits felony evasion. And since you are standing here delivering the ultimatum on her behalf, using a text message on a device registered to your law firm, you become a co-conspirator to international money laundering. Vida stared at Jasper. She didn't blink, but her hand lowered slightly, the phone screen dimming against her side. Sophia didn't tell you the Europeans were already in the building with their own server, did she? I asked softly. She told you it was just me and Bowen trying to hide money. She lied, Vida, just like she lied to me for 24 years. Vida looked at the single sheet of paper in Jasper's hand, the extortion demand, the physical proof that she was brokering a stolen funds hostage situation on behalf of a deeply compromised client. Return the money to the operating account by 2:30, Jasper said, checking his own watch. Or I walk back into that boardroom and hand Imogen Trask your name, your bar number, and a sworn statement that you attempted to extort a foreign conglomerate. Imogen's legal team will have you disbarred by Friday. Vida's eyes darted between me and Jasper. She was a shark, but sharks don't bite when they realize they're chewing on a live wire. She reached out, snatched the paper from Jasper's hand, and folded it sharply in half, stuffing it back into her briefcase. I will advise my client to return the funds immediately, Vida said, her voice ice cold. She didn't look at me anymore. She turned on her heel, her white suit cutting through the dim lobby, and walked briskly toward the revolving glass door. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Jasper ran a hand over his face, letting out a low whistle. That was reckless, Ethan, Jasper muttered. If she had called your bluff. It wasn't a bluff, I said. Sophia is terrified of going to prison. She likes luxury. She likes control. She doesn't have the stomach for actual criminal risk. Vida knows she'll force Sophia to reverse the wire. We waited in the lobby. 2:20, 2:25. I watched the digital clock above the security desk tick over, the red numbers glowing. My stomach was a tight knot of acid cold cough. Marcus, the security guard, deliberately avoided looking in our direction. At 2:31, Jasper's phone buzzed. It was a secure email from Bowen. Jasper opened it. His face went entirely blank. What? I asked. The money came back, Jasper said slowly. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. But not all of it. Define not all of it. $370,000 just hit the operating account. Jasper read from the screen. It's short $80,000. $80,000. The exact amount of Ryan's margin call. The pieces slammed together in my head with the force of a physical blow. Ryan hadn't just come to my hotel room to extort me with old blueprints. He had come to me because he couldn't reach Sophia, or because Sophia had hesitated to give him the money she had stolen. But when he left my room empty-handed, terrified and desperate, he must have gone straight to her. And Sophia, realizing her golden child was about to be financially ruined by his brokerage firm, had broken off a piece of the stolen corporate fund to bail him out before Vida even made it my lobby. She couldn't return the full $450,000 because she no longer had it. She paid Ryan's broker, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Jasper closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose, which means the company account is still $80,000 short, and Imogen Trask is not going to care where it went. She only cares that the ledger doesn't balance. It proves the breach was real. I have to cover it, I said immediately. Wire $80,000 from my personal checking into the firm. I can't, Jasper said, his voice tight. Sophia's emergency injunction this morning froze your personal account, remember? Everything with your name on it is locked until the preliminary hearing on Monday. The bank won't let you move $50, let alone $80,000. I stared at him. The sheer suffocating irony of it hit me like a wave. I was theoretically worth $70 million, but because of my wife's scorched earth legal tactic, I didn't have access to $80,000. And without that $80,000, the $70 million was going to vanish, leaving me with nothing but a mountain of lawsuit from Thad Beckett and the European buyer. What about your offshore trust? Jasper asked. Can you pull from there? It's irrevocable, I said. And the transfer hasn't cleared escrow yet because Imogen froze it an hour ago. It's a closed loop. I'm completely illiquid. We stood in the lobby of the building I built, paralyzed. You need a short-term loan, Jasper said, his mind racing, tapping his phone against his palm. A bridge loan, just until Monday. I can try to pull it from my firm's discretionary fund, but my partners will need to approve it, and that takes 24 hours minimum. We don't have 24 hours. Imogen gave us 48, but she's going to check the ledger today to verify Vida's return. If she sees a partial deposit, she'll know Sophia spent. She'll know the company was officially robbed and the money is gone. My phone vibrated in my breast pocket. pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a frantic text from Vita or another threat from Ryan. It was a text from an unknown number. I know about the audit. I know you're 80 short. Meet me at the Grand Central Oyster Bar in 20 minutes. Come alone, I stared at green. The area code was local, but the number wasn't in my contact. Who is it? Jasper asked, seeing my expression harden. I turned the screen toward him. Jasper read the text, his brow furrowing. Is it Caden Farrow? Jasper guessed. Trying to buy you out or leverage Sophia's mess? No, I said. I looked at the deliberate, precise punctuation of the text. I remembered the perfectly worded legal threat from this morning. I remembered the man who had paid $50,000 from a slush fund 24 years ago to make a problem go away. It's Thad Beckett. I left Jasper standing by the security desk and walked out into the afternoon heat. The oyster bar was loud, smelling heavily of brine, fried batter, and damp tile. I spotted him immediately. Thad Beckett hadn't aged well. The sharp-jawed rising star from the old campaign photos was gone, replaced by a heavy-set man in his late 50s with thinning hair and bruised bags under his eyes. He was sitting in a back booth beneath the Art Guastavino ceiling, staring into a half-empty glass of scotch. He wore a dark windbreaker over a dress shirt, trying and failing to look inconspicuous. I slid into the booth across from him. He didn't offer his hand. You blew up my life, Thad said. His voice was a gravelly whisper, barely carrying over the clatter of silverware and echoing conversation. My poll numbers dropped 12 points this morning. My campaign manager quit at noon. You took a 24-year-old mistake and dropped it on my head. You slept with a woman drowning in debt, paid her off with campaign funds, and walked away, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. I raised your son. Don't look for an apology here, Thad. He gripped his glass. I can tie you up in court for the rest of your life. Defamation, emotional distress, interference. I have lawyers who do nothing but bleed people dry. And I have the bank recs, I replied. I have the DNA. If we go to discovery, every single text, email, and bank statement you've sent for the last 2 decades becomes public record. You won't just lose the elect. You'll go to federal prison for campaign finance fraud. Thad swallowed hard. The fight went out of his eye, leaving only exhaustion. Then what do you want? You didn't come here to gloat. I want $80,000, I said, transferred into my firm's operating account. Immediate, within the next 10 minutes. Thad blinked, genuinely confused. 80 grand? You're sitting on a $70 million buyout and you're shaking me down for 80 grand? My assets are temporarily frozen because of your ex-mistress, I said flatly. I need my company's ledger to balance before an audit concludes at 5 o'clock. If it balances, my sale goes through. If it goes through, I fly to Europe tomorrow and you never hear from me again. And if I pay you, Thad asked, his eyes narrowing. I release a statement to the press, I said. I will say that during a highly emotional and contentious divorce proceeding, I made exaggerated claims regarding my wife's past and that the DNA tests were misinterpreted. I won't explicitly clear you, but I will give you enough deniability. Spin it to your donor. I'll call it a bitter husband's meltdown. Thad stared at. He was doing the political calculus in his head. $80,000 was nothing to a man with his connect. It was a cheap price to stop a scandal that was currently incinerating his career. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and dialed a number. It's me, Thad said into the receiver. I need an expedited wire transfer from the discretionary PAC account. 80,000. It needs to clear in 5 minutes. I'll text you the routing number. He hung up and looked at me. I texted Jasper to send the firm's routing information to the number Thad provided. We sat in silence, the noise of the oyster bar washing over us. 2 men bound together by the same toxic woman. 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Jasper. Ledger balances. Imogen is signing off. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. Thad looked up at his face drawn. The statement then. When do you release it? I'll have my lawyer draft tonight, I said. Good luck with your election, Thad. And if 2 boys named Ryan and Tyler come looking for you, I suggest you change your number. They have expensive taste. I walked out of Grand Central and back into the fading afternoon sunlight. I didn't go back to the office. I didn't need. Jasper would handle the final signature. By tomorrow morning, the $70 million would be sitting in the irrevocable offshore trust, far beyond the reach of Sophia, her lawyer, and any judge in New York State. My phone rang as I walked toward my hotel. It was Sophia. I answered it. Ethan, she said, her voice shaking, brittle, dripped of all its former arrogance. Vita dropped. She said I lied to her. The bank froze the $370,000 I sent back, pending a fraud investigation. Caden won't return my call. We have nowhere to go. I listened to the panic in her voice. 24 hours ago, she had stood on a stage and tried to execute me in front of my peers. She had laughed while her sons cheered for my demise. You have precisely what you earned, Sophia, I said quietly. Please, she sobbed. Ryan is a mess. Tyler is begging me to fix it. We don't even have a hotel for tonight. You can't just leave us on the street. I didn't leave you, I replied. You left me. I just made sure you couldn't take my life with you when you went. I hung up the phone. I opened my contact, found her name, and pressed block. Then I did the same for Ryan and Tyler. I dropped the phone into my pocket and kept walking down the avenue. The weight of the last 24 years finally gone, the air tasting remarkably clean.